Hi, I'm Matthew Bunce.
Hi, I'm Mark from Baggum.
And we're going to talk you through our project we did with VBD, SDDC, 3 countries, 90 days.
Yep.
A wonderful disclaimer, please read it in full. The project that we did was for a multinational telco company. They operate in Europe, Asia, Africa, and Oceania. They have their group IT function in Germany, Ireland, and Italy. And they have a large vSphere install base of about 4,000 hosts across those 3 sites. The project goals we were given was they wanted a centrally managed platform. They wanted to be able to do rapid deployment because they had very high growth rates. They needed to reduce their operational costs, simplify the deployment, while also standardizing their scalability, so a building block approach. And they had incredibly tight timescales. We were given 90 days to stand this up. This would normally be twice that, if not 3 times that. The project phases initially was to deploy in Germany. It was a 2 region, so region A and region B, VVD deployment with DR for the management components and no cross vCenter EDSX. Phase 2 was to deploy in Ireland and Italy and synchronize the VIO deployments between the 3 countries. Phase 3 would to introduce cross-site via NSX and add additional compute pods from multi-vendors, including VxRail and VxRack and VxBlock, and also to introduce DR.
So we're going to talk a little bit about what the VMware Validated Design is. Does anybody know what VMware Validated Design is? Everyone? Yeah? Okay. So, a couple of you don't? Cool. So, the VMware Validated Design is more like a reference architecture. It consists of building blocks. It's based on management, it's based on edges, it's based on compute. And those are being deployed per availability zone, also called a region, and there are 2 per site. So, what is also mentioned by the reference architecture is how the management compute pods are being deployed, how data protection is being handled, and the recovery extensibility is being done. What the reference architecture is actually the blueprint, because it is developed and tested by VMware itself. So if you build it by their standard, you know it's going to work. You can deploy the blueprint for multiple use cases. A couple are automating IT for IT, microsegmentation, and DevOps for IT.
So what VMware Validated Design isn't, it's not a product, you can't buy it. There's not a SKU you can go and order from somebody. It's not a turnkey solution, it's not like Enterprise Hybrid Cloud or VMware Cloud Foundation. It is effectively just a guideline to follow and an implementation best practice.
So what do you get when you deploy or you want to deploy VMware Validated Design? So the VMware Validated Design consists of multiple documents. Key documents are, for example, the design decision workbook, because that one contains all the important choices you make for their platform. Also is really important the architecture details and design. So that is how the whole platform is going to look like. So one of the important documents is not mentioned on this slide, and that's actually the operate plan. So when a new VMware Validated Design is being released, a new document will be presented with all the steps that are necessary to deploy, to upgrade your VVD to the new standard.
So if you deploy say a VVD 3.02 deployment, there will be a guide that will take you to VVD 4 and then up to 4.1. If you stay within the deployment guide, they guarantee that the upgrade path will work. There will be no issues along that process. So that's a very key document to have and to follow. This is an example of the design decisions you get within the kit. Each one of these design decisions will guide how you deploy it and things like scale and also resiliency. The details within each one of these questions should be asked of the customer. They will decide, and then we will collect these, and this will what guides the overall deployment.
So what's actually in the VMware Validated Design? There's a bill of material, and here you can see all the components that are part of the VMware Validated Design. When you are on a specific version of the VMware Validated Design, there are specific versions for each of these components. If a new VMware Validated Design is being released, that means that all products will be updated accordingly. And the whole documentation is describing how you can upgrade to the specific level for the components.
So initially with VVD3, there were some missing components. So vCenter Update Manager was one of the key issues that we had, that when you deployed VVD, there was no way to actually update that. It was all a manual update process to patch and everything like that. So that's one of the bits we had to extend within our project to be able to give the customer a platform they could manage easily. So this is how we deployed it. We had across the 3 sites, Dusseldorf, Milan and Dublin, each one of them having a separate availability zone within a separate VX block. We had a management set of hosts, an automation pod which includes all the management components, the automation and operations, and then different clusters for the workloads. We used cross vCenter Universal NSX for management, but initially only single site NSX for the workloads.
So this is how the platform looked like. So there were 3 sites based in Dublin, Milan and Dusseldorf. The first deployment that we did was like the blueprint for the other 3 sites. As you can see from top to bottom, it is based on a VX block. Then we have the validated design, and on top of that we have services delivered by Dell EMC.
So what we changed from the actual blueprint of VVD was that where the bill of materials for the NSX license says it needs the enterprise, we used advanced, and that was a constraint from the customer from their licensing agreement. They were pending a new enterprise license agreement, and they didn't want to purchase new licenses while that was going ahead. So this is why we didn't have cross vCenter for the production workloads in phase 1 and 2. The customer didn't want to have any non-Windows VMs joined to the domain, so any of the hosts, the VCSA, were not directly joined to Active Directory. They were only able to use them as our identity source. And because it was running on a VX block, we used the Dell EMC Unified Storage instead of a vSAN. This meant we had one large 20 terabyte data store, which had all the management components on it, which presented a significant single point of failure. Unfortunately, the design at the time did not allow us to vary around that, so it was a risk the customer accepted as part of the deployment.
So how did we do the deployment? Deployment of VVD, we delivered that through the deployment toolkit. The deployment toolkit is only available through VMware PSO. It's an appliance with all kinds of scripts to deploy the SDDC. You feed it an Excel sheet with all the information, for example, service accounts, passwords, IP addresses, and after that the whole SDDC from start to finish will be automatically deployed. If something happens during deployment, you can also select where you want to restart. For example, if you have issues during deployment due to firewall issues, you could start redeployment from a specific point in time.
So one of the main issues we found here was that while it was, we had to gather the information up and get it accurate to start with, there were a small typo at an early stage would not necessarily be found until later when another component failed. So we would have to backtrack on a number of occasions to identify where the failure happened before we could roll it forwards. So while it did save us time on the deployment, the actual time troubleshooting and gathering the information initially did cause some additional delays. So it's a balancing out between doing a manual deployment and an automated deployment. So this can be done outside of PSO, and you can be done using the build kits rather than the toolkit. So it comes down to how you wish to deploy it, whether you wish to have a PSO-led engagement or whether you wish to do it yourself.
So part of the challenge that we encountered was the rigid bill of materials. That means that we were limited to specific versions to stay within the upgrade path of the VMware Validated Designs. That means you can upgrade, you won't break any support, but if you want to upgrade according to the documentation, then you have an issue. So that's one of the challenges we had. Because we deployed everything on VX blocks, we have some issues with the RCM lock step. The VMware Validated Design that we used was based on the 3.0.2, and actually when we started the project, version 4 was released. but due to the time constraints, we could not get the VMware Validated Design 4 deployed. One of the other issues that we encountered was that the VVD was based on a single tenant. That means that for one single customer. For the actual customer, we needed to deploy multiple tenants, and that was not really described, so we need to add that to the document itself.
So where the toolkit was able to deploy the first tenant, we then had to manually deploy each individual tenant after that, so the edges, the DLR. The VX block, while it gave us a solid platform to build it on, because of the RCM issues, it meant that you had to go and do an RCM update before you could update VVD. So that became a problem when we were trying to move to things like 6.5 and the VVD4, because the RCM for 6.5 hadn't been released at the point where VVD4 was released.
So, thank you very much. If there's any questions, we would like to answer them after the session.
Yep. Thank you.